Welcome back to Tide Pod on the YouTube home of Tide Illustrated. Jack Knowlton, Tony Sakalis, back with another preview. And if I can't really believe it, it's our last regular season game preview of the season already because we're in Iron Bowl week. We are recording this on a Wednesday because we're going to enjoy our Turkey Day, as I hope all of you guys watching and listening did. You're hearing this on a Friday as Alabama is preparing to try and bounce back from a horrific loss to Oklahoma by winning its fifth Iron Bowl in a row, sending some seniors out with an undefeated record against arch rival Auburn. 2:30 p.m. Saturday on ABC. Everyone knows the drill for the Iron Bowl. I'm very, very excited for this game, despite Alabama's, maybe some depleted context or larger implications of it. It's still the Iron Bowl. It's still a fantastic game. In my opinion, and I'm fairly new to this rivalry, I think it is the best one, just the bitterness and the history of it all and the chaos that sometimes happens in some of these games. Tony, before we dive into some of the keys to this game in particular, how excited are you to cover yet another Iron Bowl and witness, I'm sure, some chaos in Bryant-Denny on Saturday?
I am less excited. The game does not mean as much now. I guess you could argue it still does, but actually, I take that back. In a lot of ways, it means more now because I think this might be the only thing Alabama can hang its hat on this season. Obviously, we're kind of still in shock from that Oklahoma loss, one of the worst losses I've seen in Alabama, like since I've covered the team since 2016. Still kind of puzzled by that loss, but it's almost like the hangover from that is kind of diminished Iron Bowl week a little bit, but I'm excited. I always love covering an Iron Bowl. To be honest with you, they're, from a journalistic standpoint, they're more fun in Auburn just because so many zany things happen over there. You had the comeback in 2010 where Auburn, upset, or where actually Auburn beat Alabama and came back. It wasn't an upset. So there's been some, and there's been some decent games in Bryant-Denny Stadium, especially if you're an Alabama fan. So I'm excited to see it. Like you said, I think this is the best rivalry in college football. I know a lot of people are going to say Michigan, Ohio State, but I just think, even when, like Auburn is bad, they still usually present a challenge for Alabama. And so these two fan bases hate each other. I do think there's something special about it being an in-state rivalry. You look at some of these other ones and it's across state lines. I think it's kind of important, and it's extra fun that this is an in-state rivalry. So I'm pumped about it. Maybe a little bit less pumped just because it's been such a weird week, but it should be a fun one. And I think once the game rolls around, I'll be totally locked in and pumped up about it.
Yeah, full disclosure, I've never covered an Iron Bowl in person, and so this will be my first in-person one. I've obviously I feel like most of the memories of that most of the national audience have about it. You remember the super, super big moments, but watching it from afar. So I'm excited to experience it up close and personal. Obviously, I've seen Bryant-Denny rocking all season long, and I'm excited to see it at its peak or I guess it'll be kind of peak hatred for the Tigers, but at its peak for this game on Saturday. Should be a very, very good time. And I think that's just a good segue. We got to dive into it because, of course, like you said, Alabama is trying to bounce back. They're certainly not looking to end on an 8-4 season with a loss to its arch rival. And it is going to take something, quite a bit to beat this Auburn team. They are in really good form right now. Obviously pulled off a huge win over Texas A&M to give itself even more momentum coming into Bryant-Denny. So kind of two teams in the opposite spectrum of momentum right now, Tony, and just kind of diving into some keys to the game. I feel like the biggest thing this week that we've heard from players, coaches, in terms of what Auburn can do is this running game, right? Jarquez Hunter, the senior running back, he's second in the SEC in rushing yards, has over 1,100, 8 touchdowns as well. I know Alabama linebackers coach Christian Robinson, who actually coached at Auburn in 2022. He was their run game coordinator, coached Hunter, has told his players, told us in the media that this is the best running back unit Alabama is going to face this season. What do you make of maybe some things coaches, players have said about Auburn's running game and just what Alabama's going to face on Saturday?
It's definitely something Alabama should be worried about. I mean, Alabama struggled to contain Auburn's running game last year. They're coming off of a terrible performance against Oklahoma, where Oklahoma could only run the ball. And like you said, I think they're facing, I mean, statistically, they're facing the best running back in the SEC. And I think, honestly, Jarquez Hunter might be the best running back. And then you look at the other things that give Alabama problems, a running quarterback. Well, Peyton Thorne can run the ball as well. So, if you look at this Auburn team, and they're kind of like a souped up version of Oklahoma. I know Oklahoma beat Auburn earlier this season, but that was kind of on a fluke play. I think if Auburn played Oklahoma on a neutral field, this weekend, I would definitely pick Auburn. And so I think they do a lot of the things that have caused Alabama trouble, especially on the ground. And that's something that's a big concern. It's something that Alabama is going to have to really kind of buckle up the chin straps and really come to play. They're going to have, they can't miss on tackles. They're going to have to be really sound up front. And then they're just going to have to make stops. It's going to be a lot harder too, because, you don't have Deontae Lawson either. So, I mean, that's, you're playing a little bit shorthanded now against a good team. An Auburn team that, is playing for a bowl, and playing and then really probably comes into Bryant-Denny Stadium thinking that it has the right ingredients to pull an upset. And that starts on the ground. And I think that's going to be really key. I think you're going to see in the first few drives, if Alabama can come out and really shut down Auburn, I think that they can kind of, put a flag down per se and get things done, and maybe make a statement and build some momentum. But I think this could actually be a close game, Jack. I think that you look at this, the way Jarquez Hunter runs the ball, Peyton Thorne runs the ball, the way Alabama struggled against that. If Auburn wants to control the clock like some other teams did, I think it could be a long day if Alabama doesn't get things sorted out pretty quick.
Well, and you mentioned the injury to Lawson, and that's where I wanted to go off. How much more worried does it make you, with him being out? Obviously, Justin Jefferson has been the one to step up. He's going to wear the headset and the green dot on his helmet and be the signal caller on defense and the one who communicates with the staff, or I guess gets relayed information, because it's only one-sided communication, isn't it? I mean, just with that in mind, and then obviously, I'd love your take as well. I don't think we talked too much about this, of Jamarian Latham, a guy who was playing the bandit position, who's now he flipped over to the wolf spot at Oklahoma. Kane Womack this week said he did a really good job of accomplishing that. Christian Robinson gave him some praise as well. He, of course, coaches that position. Kind of a lot of changes all over this defensive front. Does that make you worried, or are you optimistic that the Tide can be versatile enough to still slow this down?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, I think they have the depth and the versatility to kind of handle some of these, hits that they've taken on defense, but you can't help but be worried about it. I mean, this is a team that's not, after last week's not seeming to trend in the right direction, and it's not going to get any easier now. So, like I said, I think Alabama's got young players that can step up, or versatile players that can play in multiple roles. But this is not ideal for what you want if heading into a rivalry game, with the trajectory of both teams and, the style of, Auburn's rushing attack. You don't want to be without a guy like Deontae Lawson. So I think that's a big loss. There's no other way around it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to take a lot from, we've seen Jahad Campbell play all over the field. I think he's going to have a big game. And Latham, I mean, if they get that run game established, I think they're going to be able to really target him, because if you're going to, if he's not going to know what's coming, you're able to do some play action stuff. He's all of a sudden dropping back in coverage a step late. He's a bigger guy.
Yeah,
what matchups can you expose? I don't know.
Yeah, with Latham, I mean, like, you got to think, like, yes, he's capable of dropping back, but do you really? I mean, there's a reason why he was playing Bandit before he was playing Wolf, So I mean, like, yeah, that's I don't know how much Auburn's gonna throw the ball in this game, but yeah, anytime, any rep that you have where he's dropping back is probably not ideal. You're almost kind of, I guess, on the flip side, maybe you can get away a little bit more with Latham playing the Wolf, because he's a bigger guy and you're going up against the run, but still, it's not, it's kind of like, I wouldn't say it's a square peg in a round hole, but it's like a ovalish kind of, you got to kind of shift it in to fit in the round hole. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it still fits, but you got to kind of finagle it a bit.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think there's just some weird personnel switch stuff. And yeah, you just look at it, this run defense was simply not good enough against Oklahoma. And I mean, Peyton Thorne, Auburn's quarterback, hasn't done too much with his legs this season, but Jackson Arnold hadn't really either and managed to really get that going. So, it was kind of like we said after the Oklahoma recap, it was a formula that has been laid out for how to beat this Alabama defense.
Yeah, and Peyton Thorne is capable of making plays with his legs. I don't know what the numbers are. I haven't looked at his numbers yet, but I mean he's somebody that can run with the ball. And you look at a lot of that too with college football is sacks. One of the things Jackson Arnold's rushing numbers weren't great heading into that game, but he had like 29. He had taken like 29 sacks. So add about another 100 yards or more to his total, right? Because the 3 or 4 yards a sack, those really add up. So I think Peyton Thorne's a guy that can hurt Alabama with his legs, not to the extent of maybe like a Jalen Milroe but he's somebody that can pick up first downs and really kind of make things difficult for sure.
Yeah, he's definitely capable. And if they get Hunter going, I totally agree. Going back to what you said at the top, it's gonna for sure be a close game. You mentioned Auburn, we'll see how much they decide to throw it, but like Alabama, they've got some studs to throw it to if they do, of course, choose to air it out. And I mentioned at the top, Auburn's kind of found some momentum. That has been largely thanks to the connection between Peyton Thorne, who has gotten comfortable. I believe he has 8 touchdowns and 1 pick in the last 3 games. Finding a certain freshman wide receiver named Cam Coleman. He had 7 catches, 128 yards, 2 touchdowns against Texas A&M, has 5 on the year. You've got that. And then on the other side for Alabama, you, of course, have Ryan Williams. I think this is a very fitting battle here, Tony. It was the number 1 and number 2 players in the state in recruiting just last year. They were the number 2 and number 3 ranked wide receivers. Ryan Williams was targeted by Auburn after he decommitted it from Alabama. And even before that, you've got Coleman doing his thing. Williams, of course, been one of the most explosive players in the country this year. And then, you've got some other guys in the mix too. Perry Thompson's another good wide receiver for Alabama, or for Auburn, excuse me. Xavier Brown on the defensive side for Alabama. To me, this game could come down to, which of these maybe in-state guys gets the last opportunity to maybe play the hero here. Maybe I'm putting a little too much narrative into it, but a lot of kind of explosive talent on both these teams that I think it's fun, especially with that in-state factor and this rivalry.
Yeah, I mean, just the Ryan Williams factor alone, with him flirting with Auburn and Auburn thinking that they were going to flip him. And then, go back to when he recommitted to Alabama, after the Alabama Auburn game, and, he commits to Alabama, and then that game, right after Alabama beats Auburn in basketball, he announces like the second after that he's not visiting Auburn. It's just like, then there's been some trolling back and forth with the Ryan Williams recruiting saga. And so, obviously he's going to be playing in front of home fans, so he's going to get the support. But Ryan Williams won't be a popular player when he goes to Auburn next year. And so it's always going to be interesting to follow him in this rivalry, and kind of like, just because it's one of those guys that both teams fought after. But there's probably a rivalry too between him and Cam Coleman, like you said, of who's the best player in that class, who's the wide receiver in that class. I think Ryan Williams has received quite a bit more hype. I know Cam Coleman is kind of picked up lately, and he's gotten some praise, but throughout the season, I'm sure he's kind of gotten irked that, Ryan Williams is ahead of him. So I bet you there's a little bit of a friendly competition, or maybe not even a friendly competition between those two. It's going to be one of those, battles, assuming they both stay at their respective schools. You can never, I guess, count on that now in today's transfer age. But assuming, Cam Coleman stays at Auburn and Ryan Williams stays at Alabama, they're always going to be compared to each other. It's always going to be a back and forth. Between those two of who has the best guy. It almost reminds me of, and this is maybe even before your time, but you had Julio Jones and AJ Green at Georgia, or AJ Green at Georgia, Julio Jones at Alabama. And they were like always compared to each other. They were picked both in the first round. And even out throughout the NFL, they were kind of like, at some points in the, kind of compared against each other. So I think that could be the same kind of battle where we're always kind of looking at Ryan Williams and Cam Coleman almost in the same breath. And that's kind of fun, just for the rivalry's sake, and maybe have a little inner rivalry between them.
Yeah, I think that's just a worthwhile narrative to point out. And of course, I mean, I think we should mention this as well. What Demarcus Riddick, another freshman, Auburn's freshman linebacker, said, didn't call Ryan Williams a big game player. There was some responses from the Alabama side, but what did you make of that? And also just how Alabama, there's been kind of a clear message of how they're looking internally. We didn't get anything from the players that bubbled up of, talking any smack to Auburn like we did from the other side, which to me felt kind of deliberate just to, avoid the rat poison and the outside noise and all the other cliches you want to use.
Well, it's not surprising that Demarcus Riddick would say that Ryan Williams is not a big time player. He apparently forgets that Georgia exists, because he obviously didn't see Ryan Williams play against Georgia, and then he went on to say that he's never lost a rivalry game in his career, when Auburn has lost to Georgia this season. And that is probably Auburn's second biggest rival. So, apparently he's just ignoring the Georgia Bulldogs there, entirely. I love it, though. I love Demarcus Riddick for that. I think too often in today's age, we have all this coach speak. I love it when a guy just is confident enough to say that. I mean, as a writer, it gives us stuff to write about. As a fan, it gives you a reason to hate him. Who cares if Alabama fans hate Demarcus Riddick? It's also, you could say it's, bulletin board material, but if Alabama needs bulletin board material to beat Auburn, then, something's wrong with them. So I think that I love it. I kind of wish you had more back and forth. You have it in the pros. I don't know why you wouldn't have it. I don't know why it's so frowned upon by some people. I personally think it's kind of fun to add a rivalry. He's not hurting anybody. I don't think, Ryan Williams is going home and crying over that. But it's going to be fun now, and it adds another wrinkle to this game. If Demarcus Riddick has a bad game, he's going to hear about it for 365, maybe for the rest of his career. He did say that he would never lose to Alabama. So if he loses, it's going to be tough. He's going to hear about it every single time. That's a bold statement too, by the way. You're still an underdog in this game. It's still in Bryant-Denny, and you still got to play him at least 3 times. Going your freshman year and saying that you're never going to lose to Alabama is quite the statement. But we'll see how it plays out for him. I'm not going to dunk on him, because I think it's kind of cool that he had the guts to go out and say that. That being said, I can see it backfiring for him, but that's just, I guess, the chance you got to take.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it turns out for him. I completely agree with you, by the way. I like when some fuel gets added to the fire, and it makes for a better rivalry. So yeah, there's some of the discourse there, but even as well, Tony, with, kind of going back to, I guess, Cam Coleman specifically, we saw Alabama really gashed on the ground against Oklahoma, but how worried are you from maybe a potentially more explosive Auburn passing attack should they choose to air it out a little bit, just given how they've played, even just against Texas A&M, they were able to kind of find that connection?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about Auburn, right? I mean, they have a lot of Auburn's a top 25 team when it comes to talent. They just haven't been able to put it together this season. So you look at them, and there's a lot of reasons to be afraid of this team. If they can run the ball and they can establish things, then yeah, they have. That's what I said. They were kind of a souped up version of Oklahoma, where, they can run the ball like the Sooners did, but they're also going to be able to pass the ball way better. And that was one thing that's the concerning thing about, Alabama's loss. That the most concerning thing was just how one-dimensional Oklahoma was, and they were still able to win that game so convincingly. With Auburn, yeah, you'd almost expect them to be able to hit. They're not a consistent team through the year, but they're kind of like what Alabama was early in the season, where they hit a lot of big plays, and so they have a big play offense, and it doesn't always work. But a rivalry game, you got to think too, is Hugh Freeze going to dial up some trick plays? Has he been scheming for this game? And this is a game that you can kind of change the trajectory of your season. I wouldn't be surprised if he has some tricks, in the bag for Alabama. And I'm interested to see if, maybe they spring a few big plays, especially early, maybe catch Alabama still hungover from the loss. I mean, we started the show by me talking about it. I'm sure the players are still a little bit dejected, I guess. So, Yeah, I think that the big play possibility is a really big it's really a factor and something you got to kind of keep an eye on.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the potential for them to unleash that is higher, both with how Auburn's playing and yeah, with just Alabama's susceptibility at times to give those up. And we'll see obviously how that plays out for them. Kind of flipping to the other side of the ball, and kind of I think a thing we're really trying to see in terms of player response. Jalen Milroe, of course, coming off of one of, if not his worst performance in an Alabama uniform against Oklahoma, throwing 3 picks, and is gonna need to find his footing if Alabama wants to win this game. We obviously heard from him a little bit this week. It was kind of pretty prototypical to what we usually hear from Jalen Milroe. But Tony, what are your kind of expectations, I guess, for him, and just what are you maybe watching for in terms of what he has to improve on, or just bounce back from and do better than he did against Oklahoma?
Talk about another player that DeMarcus Riddick kind of called out. He said that he was faster than Jalen Milroe, and they
Yeah.
just kept him in the box the whole game. So that Jalen Milroe responded by saying that he didn't know who DeMarcus Riddick was, and that's about the extent of the trash talk that Alabama delivered. But yeah, it's a statement game for Jalen, and not only just answering that and kind of proving himself, and it's really this is a guy that I think a lot of people still have as a first round quarterback. Even after the terrible showing against Oklahoma, it's not a strong quarterback class. And it's really, if Jalen's able to end strong with a win in the Iron Bowl, even if Alabama doesn't make the playoffs, if he does well in the bowl game, you really start springboarding that to the draft. And you got to kind of take that bad taste out of Scout's mouth, because if the last thing they see you is struggling back-to-back games against unranked Oklahoma and Auburn, that's going to hurt your draft potential, And so I think it's a huge game for Jalen. A lot, for the legacy of, being 2-0 against Auburn. Obviously, he had the Gravedigger play last year. His name is always going to be somewhat of a positive context against Auburn, but that could really diminish if he loses this game and the season ends so terribly for Alabama. That being said, he comes out, has a great performance against Auburn, and he's kind of that guy that's won all the big games, right? I mean, like, there's always going to be that tarnish on his Alabama career if he goes 2 seasons and they don't win a title. But at least he can say, well, I beat Georgia twice, I beat Auburn twice, I beat LSU twice. 1-1 against Tennessee. It's a game where you can kind of like shape your dynasty a little bit, or your not your dynasty, but your reputation a little bit more. So yeah, I think it's a huge game for Jalen, for a lot of reasons, for legacy, for draft stock, for pride. I mean, yeah, he really should come out motivated for this one.
Yeah, I completely agree. And then just, kind of with dealing with Auburn specifically, I mean, goes back to kind of a theme we've now identified, souped up kind of Oklahoma. I mean, this defense is really good. As much as we've kind of lumped on him for trash talking, DeMarcus Riddick is a really good linebacker. He leads the team in sacks with 3. They have Kendrick Falk and Jalen McLeod, who are their nose tackles, defensive tackles, who are excellent players, up there with the highest tackle numbers on the team. Eugene Asante, another great linebacker. They have decent secondary play. So Alabama's offense as a whole, it cannot afford to sleepwalk through this game. And I to me, like Christian Robinson said with the running backs games, I think this is going to be one of the better defenses it faced. Yeah. And yeah, what are you just kind of looking for in terms of Alabama taking advantage of that?
You keep on saying like all these things about Auburn. It really kind of like you look at the talent. Like I keep on going back to it. You look at the talent on this team, and you're like, how is this team 5-6? You know what I mean? Like this team could easily be, a 9. This team could be right where Alabama is, looking to be 9-3. I mean, I'm not saying it's as good as Alabama, because I think Alabama should be better than 9-3. But like, there's an Auburn team that like could be right there. I mean, they have the talent to do so. Just was a series of bad, unfortunate events and just bad quarterback play, bad coaching, but yeah, you mentioned it. I mean, they've got a strong defensive front. That's another ingredient they have that can beat Alabama. You pressure Jalen Milroe, at least this season. If you pressure Jalen Milroe, you can force him into mistakes. You can force him into sacks, and you can really limit him. You can kind of box him up and kind of, really affect him. So if you have that strong defensive front, you saw it with Tennessee. You saw it, a little bit with Vanderbilt. I mean, Vanderbilt's not as strong as Tennessee, but you definitely saw it with Oklahoma. That those things really have affected Jalen. So I think that the Tigers, that Auburn has a chance to do that. And I once again we're saying like this could be a very dangerous matchup for Alabama.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's going to be a key is how well those Auburn players are, like you said, able to really control the edges and they limit, what Jalen Milroe can do running outside. He got caught running laterally a lot against Oklahoma. And, the difference in those games versus in a game like LSU is it went nowhere and it really, they were able to set the edge really well. And I think Auburn has the guys in its defensive front to do that. And so, I think it'll be a narrow one for sure. If especially if Jalen Milroe can't get going offensively. We talked about legacy. I think we bring it all the way full circle with kind of our last key or just thing we're watching for in terms of the context of this game, and it's what it means for the man at the helm, Tony. Kalen DeBoer has the chance to, believe it or not, Alabama fans, tie the record for most wins by a first-year head coach if he wins this game. I know it seems like he's lost every single one based on the ones he has. But in a similar vein, do something that both Nick Saban and Bear Bryant failed to do, which is win their first Iron Bowl. I'll steal the stat. I knew you had it. Dennis Franconi was the last coach to do it in 2001.
That's kind of yeah. I think about it.
Yeah, and then of course Alabama also can go undefeated at home. It's senior day. We mentioned the importance of getting this game for a group of players who can say they went their entire careers undefeated against Auburn. That is a probably free drink for life in Alabama. I would guess in some places. So just for Kalen DeBoer and what this game means in a first season that has had its fair share of ups and downs. I mean, how huge would this be in terms of just both maybe not doing it that much at this point to help your current team, but just help your reputation, help your perception as you try and, build from this year?
Yeah, I don't really know what he has to hang his hat on if he doesn't win this game and they go 8-4 and miss the playoffs. And then you also, I mean, I think most people they acknowledged that it was going to be tough for Alabama, but I think the expectation was 10-2 with like maybe it could be 9-3. 8-4 to me was always the floor for Alabama. Like that's like as bad as things could go. And so I don't feel like Alabama's had a as bad as things could go season. I mean, just last week we were thinking about Alabama possibly winning the SEC. So it doesn't seem like it's been as bad as things can go. I think you will look at this season though in that vein if he loses this game. 8-4 is pretty bad, and you'll have losses to Auburn and Tennessee. So 0-2 against the rivals, and you go into it's bad momentum heading into the transfer portal season, and that could always get kind of hairy. And I'm not saying that teams that players necessarily jump for that reason, but if there's a feeling that DeBoer is not the guy, or that that things aren't under control, that could lead to some uneasiness. And I think that this is a good game where Alabama kind of reasserts itself if it wins and says, okay, look, we're still 5 straight against Auburn. That's a huge number. And DeBoer can say, look, I'm 1-0 against Auburn. I had some first year mistakes, some first year upsets, but we were right there. If Alabama misses the playoff, they'll probably be one of the first teams out at 9-3. So there's a lot that he could then point to it being a successful season. But if it's such a swing game for me. I think you look at the season and you like kind of give DeBoer a pass for not making the playoffs if he beats Auburn, and then you just totally condemn him if from at least from a fan's perspective of how it will be looked at. This loss would be indefensible for Alabama fans. It's maybe not fair because like once again, I don't think it's been a terrible season, but it will be viewed as one. And so it's just there's going to be a ton of pressure on him. The pressure is all on DeBoer, and really none of it is on Hugh Freeze. I mean, I guess Hugh Freeze doesn't want to go without a bowl game, and he's already had a bad season. But I think at this point, it's almost like people aren't expecting Auburn to win, so they're just kind of playing with house money. And then Alabama's almost it's almost like Alabama is expected to just have this get right game and be totally fine. And I just don't know if that's going to happen. And I'm just interested to see how Kalen DeBoer responds and gets his team ready, because I think this could be a real big battle. And so, it's a huge game. It's a huge game for Kalen DeBoer. It's the biggest game. It's bigger than the Georgia game at this point in terms of building momentum for moving forward and kind of, building the right, I guess, foundation for the rest of, his, I don't want to say the rest of his Crimson Tide career, but really, I mean, you've got to have something to build on. This is a huge step for him.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point about the snowball effect either way. It kind of doesn't, on the surface, you think, oh, maybe it doesn't matter as much. Alabama's probably not going to make the playoff even if they win the game. But you're right. You go immediately, national signing day is in a week. Then the transfer portal opens. A 9-3 team has a lot different perception of it than an 8-4 team. And more specifically, a 9-3 team that shows that it didn't quit. And because I think that's a really easy thing to think that will happen and could happen after Oklahoma and after you throw your SEC championship games away, you maybe throw your college football playoff hopes away. But I think, to me, if DeBoer can galvanize this team and they show the fight that we've seen in wins over Georgia and against LSU, I think that's a big step in terms of showing who he is as a coach, and more people are going to want to play for that. So yeah, I think there's a big stake there besides just getting the one up on your rival, preventing Auburn from going to a bowl game, like you said, in doing all that stuff. But yeah, the pressure is definitely all tilted on one side. And I think to bring it full circle, it's a very good thing probably for Alabama that this game is not over in Jordan-Hare, because I think the voodoo magic there would continue to work against it, as we almost saw last season. So I think you make some really good points there. And we'll have to see. I mean, DeBoer, this is part of the reason DeBoer was hired, is to win games like this. So, that's what he's going to have to go out and prove he can do. I think that's a good segue into predictions, Tony. Our last prediction of the regular season, if you can believe it. Technically, I had the closer margin of victory for Alabama. I had them winning 28-7 over Oklahoma. You had them winning 34-10. So I guess I'll take the dub there. I also hate to break it to you. You did pick Jalen Milroe as your player.
I did, didn't
Oklahoma. So a rough one there. We need to bounce back too, Tony. This is where you have to channel our inner DeBoer and see if we can pick a better score line. Would you like me to go first for the final week, or do you have a score and player to watch in mind already?
You go first this time. I got to think of my player.
All right. I actually don't have a player off the top of my head either. I've been kind of scrolling through the roster just as we've been doing this of who I want to feed. And I think I have one now that I'm saying that. As of a score, I'm going to go a pretty basic football score. I'm not going to go any craziness. I've got the Crimson Tide by 7. I've got 28-21 Alabama. I think it's going to be a good game. I think we're going to have a really memorable Iron Bowl, just because of all of the circumstances we talked about. I think there's a lot Alabama is there to play for. And to me, Auburn, I guess this analogy doesn't really work well, or not analogy, but statement doesn't work that well, because they can claim bowl eligibility. There are still things on the line for its season. But to me, there is nothing scarier than playing a team that has nothing to lose. And I think Auburn is going to play like that. And I think they're going to keep this close, but I do have DeBoer finding the fight in this Alabama team and winning. As far as my player to watch, I think I got to go back to the narrative I fed in a story I wrote earlier on Wednesday and what I've said in this podcast today. I'm going Ryan Williams to get the one up over Cam Coleman and prove he is the supreme future of Alabama in-state byproducts. I'm going to go him to have a good game in this one and be my player of the game.
All right. Well, I'm going to go for my player of the game. I'm going to go with that first. I'm going to go with Malachi Moore. I'm being a little bit sentimental because I'm picking an Alabama player, an Alabama native to as my player. But I don't think anyone's going to care about this game on Alabama more than Malachi is. He'll also be the first ever player to play in and win 5 Iron Bowls.
It's
That's
impressive.
just kind of an interesting stat. I mean, it's a stat that wasn't possible in I think it's it's obviously a COVID year stat. So you didn't have players in the 80s that could do that, but it doesn't make it any less impressive. He had a pick in his first Iron Bowl. I think he's a guy that's gonna come up big. Whether it's a pick or it's just coming down in the box and making tackles, I think he's going to play with a lot of effort. And I think he's also going to be big in terms of kind of keeping this Alabama team focused. Like you said, are they going to have that letdown game? I think Malachi Moore is one of those guys that's going to make sure that they don't. That being said, I think it's going to be extremely close, and I'm going to go Alabama 24, Auburn 16. I think it's going to be a kind of a low-scoring game. I think it's going to be kind of like an ugly game, a lot of ground game. But I do expect Alabama. It's just like I can't not pick Alabama to pull this one out. I just, I can't imagine what we'll be writing if they don't. So a 24-16 close game. What did you say the point spread was in this one?
I don't think I did say what the point spread was in this one.
Sure
I thought it was Alabama by 5.5 off the top of my head, but
I'm still taking Alabama with the spread. Okay.
Let me make sure that's right. Hold on. I'm pulling it up right now. Oh my gosh. No, I'm sorry. It's much bigger than that. Alabama by 11.5.
Yeah. So I guess I'm taking Auburn. I'm taking Auburn with the points then. That's not a surprise. 5 was going to be like an eye-opening line, but yeah.
Yeah, 5 was too little. I just realized what I was kind of saying there. I also, I guess, have Auburn with the points in my hypothetical. I like it. We've got 2 Alabama natives as our players of the game. One young, one old, one on his way in, one on his way out. I think that's very fitting. With that, too, and a brief look back at our predictions, I picked Alabama to win every single game. You, the only one you wavered, you picked Georgia to win 23-20. But other than that, also picked Alabama to win every single game this season.
Bunch of homers.
Yeah, just doing our duty. So there you go. There's our predictions for Alabama and Auburn in our preview. And we'll finish things off, Tony, with week 14. It's rivalry week. We got some fun games to pick this week. And actually, I guess we've never formally discussed how we want to keep doing this, if we want to make picks for the championship games or something. But if this is where we're stopping for our picks around the world of college football, congratulations, because you won. This last week put you up 29-23, and we only pick 5 games a week. So we
can keep on going.
We can maybe figure something out. But you are up 29-23. Last week you got 3 correct. I only got 1. You had Ohio State over Indiana and Notre Dame over Army. I picked the underdogs in both those games because I'm a sucker. We both picked Colorado and Texas A&M. They both lost emphatically to Kansas and, of course, Auburn, respectively. And then we both picked Arizona State to beat BYU in one of the most craziest endings of a game I've ever seen. Arizona State did, in fact, win by 5, and they were favored by 3. So with that summary, let's get into week 14. We have some really, really fun games. I will go in the order of largest to smallest spread here. We will start in the ACC. There is a theme this week, and go read Tony's kind of breakdown of Alabama's still fleeting but still their chances of making the college football playoff. We're picking games that can certainly affect where the tide end up falling, assuming, of course, they beat Auburn in the Iron Bowl. And the first game that could have an impact on that, Miami and Syracuse, the Hurricanes, 11-point favorites. I will put out, if no one's paid attention to Syracuse this year, they're 8-3. They're led by Kyle McCord, Ohio State transfer. So they have had a pretty good season. That said, Miami is 11-point favorites, Tony. Do you like the Qs to maybe at least cover here, or do you like them to maybe pull an upset and help Alabama out in the playoff?
Look, there's also it's at Syracuse or whatever they're calling the Carrier Dome now. I realized I looked it up and it's not the Carrier Dome anymore.
It's not, unfortunately.
It's like some other I don't know, letter acronym dome, but it's a tough place to play. Just ask Clemson's lost there before. It's difficult, and if you look at Syracuse's season, they really have they had that blowout loss to Pitt, but their other 2 losses were relatively close. So I don't have them losing to Miami, but I will pick them with the points. I think that 11's a lot to give them when they're at home. Miami's a team that's played with its food all season. I think this could be an interesting game. I'm not ready to to pick Syracuse to go and pull the upset. But it wouldn't super shock me if this was a close one. So yeah, give me, I guess in this give me Syracuse with the points.
I've got the orange as well. I'm going to take Syracuse. I follow your logic there. That said, my Syracuse is only other ranked game other than when they beat Georgia Tech when Georgia Tech was randomly ranked 2 weeks into the season because everyone thought Florida State was good. Their only ranked game was that blowout to, of course, Eli Holstein led Pitt team. Had a good year one over there. But I will go with you on that one and pick the orange. Next up, we're going to the SEC, another game that could affect Alabama. It is a much more fun rivalry than maybe this rivalry has ever seen, or at least seen in certainly the last 15 years. I think I can reasonably say that. Number 8, Tennessee, going over to the construction site, Alabama's House of Horrors, Nashville, Tennessee, to face Vanderbilt. The Volunteers come in as 10.5-point favorites. They are ranked 8th in the country. They were seemingly the only 2-loss SEC team to survive last week. Do they survive against a frisky Vanderbilt team, Tony?
Yeah, they don't.
Whoa!
Wait, sorry. Whoa. Sorry, I was thinking about Vanderbilt. My bad. Rewind. They do.
Okay.
I had Vanderbilt in my head, and I thought you were asking me if Vanderbilt pulled off the upset. No. I do not. I think it'd be really poetic for somehow Diego Pavia to save Alabama's season after starting this decline. I just don't think Vanderbilt's the same team. They feel like they got that 6th win against Auburn, and then it just kind of hasn't been the same since. And look, it's been a great season for Vanderbilt, but I think they're kind of on the way down. I don't expect them to win. I don't even expect them to cover. I'd like to see this be a close game just because, like you said, it'd be kind of fun. The state of I don't even know. Is this really a rivalry game? It'd be fun to see Vanderbilt.
They're in the same state.
I know, but is it
about
really
as much as I can say?
No, I bet you more. There'll be more Vols fans inside that stadium than there will be Vanderbilt fans. I'd like to see it close. I actually think Tennessee is going to win by more than 10.5.
Okay. You know me, I'm a romantic. It's why I'm losing this picks game overall. Give me Pavia in the doors. And you know what? This is a fine one to hang my hat on because frankly, as long as Vanderbilt can keep it under 10.5, I can still win. So let's see if they can at least do that. You're probably going to end up being right, but man, what a story it would be for Vanderbilt to get to 7 wins and knock Tennessee out of the playoff. I can tell you one thing, it'd become a lot more of a rivalry.
Yeah, no, it definitely was a rivalry if that happened, for sure.
So I'll go with Vandy just to be fun. Next up, we're headed out west for another rivalry and another top 10 team in the way of Alabama's playoff hopes as of now. It's the Notre Dame Fighting Irish as 7.5-point favorites going into the Coliseum to face an interesting USC Trojans team. This is a fun one, Tony, I think. Notre Dame, of course, hanging their hat on only having the 1 loss, albeit to Northern Illinois, who couldn't even win the MAC. Do you like the Trojans to maybe spring an upset here, or do you like Notre Dame to cover the 7.5-point spread?
I like the Trojans to spring an upset. I've been on
this. Right.
I've been on this, and there's no rewind now. There's no rewind. I like the Trojans to pull an upset here. I've been on this game for a while. I think Notre Dame's is an overrated team, and I'm not saying that USC is a bad team, but they're probably the best 5-loss team in America, if that means anything. All 5 of their losses were by 7 points or less. They've got a lot of talent on this roster. This is a team that we thought was going to be maybe even a contender after it beat LSU early in the season. So, I think this game's out west. Notre Dame's going to have to travel cross country. Everyone's telling Notre Dame that they've basically got the playoffs in the bag. I think Notre Dame loses this game and could very much be bounced from the playoff. I think that's actually a team that Alabama could pass, even though they have an extra win and 1 less loss. I think Alabama's resume at 9-3 would be better than Notre Dame's at 10-2.
Yeah, that's going to be a really, really interesting one if USC ends up winning this game. That said, this might sound crazy. I've got the Fighting Irish in this one.
Wow.
I think Lincoln Riley is going to lay an egg. I completely follow your logic. I do think this USC team is good. A little part of me wants to pick them to cover just because of how close they've kept games. But I actually have liked where this Notre Dame team has trended. I think I have still somehow haven't forgotten that loss to or that win over A&M. I think A&M's a good team. Obviously, the way they followed that up was terrible. Marcus Freeman really needs to sort out how to beat lowly group of 5 teams, but I like them. I think they're in a good spot. I think they take care of business actually in this one. I'm gonna pick the Irish here. Next up, speaking of Texas A&M, we're gonna pick that game. It is the decider for who will face Georgia in the SEC championship. A Aggies team hosting a Longhorns team that is in a good spot for the playoff. The Aggies pretty much need to win out, including a win over Georgia, to just steal bids and cause chaos and get into the college football playoff. Texas is 5.5-point favorites on the road in what is going to be, man, if I wasn't at the Iron Bowl, this would be the game I'd want to be at because it is going to be a real fun one in College Station. Do you like Texas to cover the 5.5-point spread?
Look, I was the same way about Texas A&M as I was about USC, where I was ready to pick the Aggies. After losing to Auburn, I think that's just the gut punch that's going to do in the Aggies for good. And look, unlike Alabama, the Aggies still control their destiny. They can win this game, go to the SEC championship game, and make the playoff. So there's still plenty to play for. They hate Texas. I was so ready to pull an upset and actually just pick the Aggies outright. I'm actually going to go full opposite now. I'm going to take Texas, and even against the points, I'm taking Texas to win outright, or I guess despite the points.
I kind of want to stick with Texas A&M. There's just still something I like about them. There is a very good argument to be made that they went with the wrong quarterback. There's a growing camp of people who thought Connor Wegman was the better option, and I think he's going to make a portal team really, really happy in the offseason. But they're at home. That place is dangerous. It's a hard place to win. I mean, Notre Dame did it, but I don't know. I'm going to rock with Texas A&M and just see if we can have just another layer of chaos to what has been a wild season. And I think I'm just going to root for that, and I want to pick it. So once again, if Texas A&M loses by 3 points, I can still be right. So we'll live with that. Last one. We're going to finish off in an ACC SEC battle. Number 15, South Carolina going to number 12, Clemson. The Tigers are 2.5-point favorites. This one is also, I think, going to be really, really fun. Talk about a game it's probably the best addition in this game that we've seen in quite some time. A lot of playoff hopes on the line for both of these teams. Who do you got in what's essentially a toss-up?
I feel I remember you calling this South Carolina rise and how they were going to finish strong. So credit to you for that. And I'm going to continue that. I think they're going to win. I'm picking South Carolina outright. I think they're going to go up there and upset Clemson, and perhaps they make a push for the playoff. I don't know if they're out of it yet. And I think that they're actually a team that could jump Alabama despite losing to Alabama. So that'll be interesting. That's kind of like a game where maybe Alabama can't win with whoever wins that one. They're going to be maybe hurt either way. I think obviously Alabama will be rooting for South Carolina, but I'm not sure it's going to help them as much as maybe some fans think. That being said, I just like South Carolina a lot. They're a team that almost beat Alabama at home, came very close to doing so. I think that, you look at that front seven that they have, I think it's going to cause some problems. I don't think that, Clemson's been better, but I don't think that they have I think this is a case of where the SEC, and it's not a good week to say this because the SEC was down last week, but I think this is a case where the SEC kind of shows its strength, and it shows that, maybe South Carolina's not one of the teams you think about, but this is where an SEC team is better than an ACC team. And I think I really like South Carolina as a sleepy team, and a team that could, I think, they're hot enough. They could win. They could maybe make some noise if they got to the playoff.
Yeah, I think it says a lot about this season that South Carolina is, like you said, in position for a possible playoff push. I think that's absolutely wild. This was a team that beat Old Dominion by 3 points in week 2. It takes a lot for me to get over the annoying feelings I have over Shane Beamer. I am not a very big Beamer ball guy. I don't like him very much. I think he's kind of annoying, but I love this team that he's put together. They are explosive. They have just athletes. I think they're going to win this game. If this was in Williams-Brice, I think I'd have him by double digits. I really think, no disrespect to Clemson, Cade Klubnik's had a good year. I got South Kakalaka in this one. I like the Gamecocks. I like the Gamecocks to win. Like you said, I predicted they were going to go 9-3. I'm sticking with it, and maybe that affects them for the college football playoff. Rivalry week should be a fun one. It's going to be a fun one in Tuscaloosa and Bryant-Denny on Saturday. If you're going, enjoy the game. Hope there's not too many angry Thanksgiving dinners with what's to come. If there's Auburn and Alabama families, all in one room, I know that can be divisive, but hope it was still a successful Thanksgiving. Hopefully the NFL gave some good primers on Thursday for you to enjoy. And we have a big one coming up in Bryant-Denny. Subscribe to Tide Illustrated. We'll have all the coverage all game long, as well as a ton of basketball stuff, recruiting with the countdown toward early signing day as well. So subscribe there. Subscribe here on the YouTube. We'll see you next time.